Hey everyone, this is Jonas from Island Works again, having a little bit more garage time, playing with my favorite toy, my Porsche 964 track car, which is going to be the fastest car that I could ever build in my garage. This time I'm working on the ignition system. The engine is making a little bit of a guest appearance in the actual car body. That will be cool. And we will work a little bit on the exhaust. Let's have a look at that. And before we get into the ignition system, I wanted to explain a little bit how a traditional ignition system works before we get into the more modern ignition system. So, to my help, I have a 2.7 liter Porsche 911 engine that goes into that car over there. I'll show a picture of it, which is a 1976 Targa that I have as well. It has a very traditional distributor-based system, which is what the 964 has originally as well, with some modifications. I unfortunately don't have the 964 distributor system anymore because I sold it to sponsor all of that craziness. But nevertheless, the way that any traditional distributor system works is all the same, or similar at least. And that is that as the engine turns, you have something here called the distributor. It looks like this, a distributor, right? And as the engine turns, you have a piece in the top that turns. And this one turns so that when every cylinder is up at its top dead center, it actually aligns with this piece here, which is just an electrode or whatever you want to call it. This one aligns with one of the cables going out. So you have this one. You have a coil, and then you of course have your ECU that sends these signals. The distributor that goes here, actually on the 964 is doubled. So if you look in the 964, you see that it's humongous. It has this gigantic belt-driven distributor that is just a monster. So what does car makers do on modern cars nowadays? Well, you go from this mechanic system that distributes the spark to the correct cylinder based on where the position of the disi is, and a coil, which on the 964 you have two of these. You go from that to this, right? So this is what all modern cars use. In different shapes and different forms, of course, because everyone has a better idea than anyone else. Naturally, everyone is an engineer, and it was not invented here, obviously. So, this is a coil on plug. So what this is it's a coil integrated up here, and then you actually have an igniter module in here. So that means there is nothing else in the whole system except this. All right, so the signal from the ECU, the engine control unit, goes in here, and the spark comes out here. Neat, huh? So it makes for a system that is faster, a system that has a little bit better control, and that is significantly more compact and cleaner. I used this before on my engine with some success. So I'm going to use the same kind of system now in my car, but this time I'm going to try to do it a little bit better. So let's have a look at what that means. So to my help to explain a little bit of the complexity with this, I'm going to use a pure 964 engine. This is the original engine that went into that car. This one has the original valve covers on the 964, which my engine does not have, and that's what I wanted to explain a little bit. So if you have one of these, you get to the inevitable challenge of trying to define which of all of these brilliant options of coil on plugs you can have. This is a Bosch Motorsport one. It's very like wobbly and does not have integrated igniter units. So this one requires a little bit more electronics, but it's supposedly really good. Then you have two that have the same length, but they have very different diameters in the top. So if I take this one, it's called Bremmy 20402. You see that? Right? If you take this one, You see that this one almost fits. And actually what I figured out is that if you have the Ren line covers here, this one fits perfectly, which was the covers I had before. The Motorsport ones, they will not fit. They're too small. And the ones that will fit really well on a 993, actually, you know what? They will actually fit on this one. I didn't know that. With my engine, 993 valve covers, this Bosch 0986221 this one fits absolutely perfectly. It's like it was made to sit here. And these are very, very common spark plugs in the industry. Unfortunately, you need 12 of them, so it turns out very expensive. But as you can see, the fit is absolutely perfect. And if you put one of them in the bottom, the fit is, you almost think they're supposed to be there. So these are the correct ones to use for this. There is some debate if the spark plugs in the bottom, which they see more heat than the ones in the top, that the electronics in these will actually fry after a while. So using these ones, if you ever wanted to use the wobbly one, which is the Bosch Motorsport ones, those could be an option for that. However, wobbly will find itself with another kind of difficulty here. In a distributor system, you have a mechanic way of distributing the spark to the right cylinder. This engine, the way that it looks in the standard form, if you have removed your distributor, actually this engine doesn't know if this cylinder is in the compression stroke or the exhaust stroke, right? Because if you remove this, there is no sensor in this engine that actually knows which stroke it's in. So we need to get a home sensor installed. So a home sensor, that's a sensor that identifies which of the two strokes the engine is on, right? And they are all based on the same principle. And the principle is that the crankshaft in the middle of the engine, that goes with the engine's RPM. But the compression versus exhaust stroke, that's actually half of the RPM. The first revolution you're in the compression stroke, and the next revolution you're in the exhaust stroke. And it's the compression stroke where you have gasoline in the cylinder, that's when you want to ignite. So looking at the back of the engine, this is where the camshaft is, right? So this rotates with half of the RPM crankshaft does. So you can put your home sensor here, right? That will work brilliantly. Or you can put your home sensor on this camshaft. So this is the right bank on a Porsche 964 if you're standing behind the car. And this is where you normally have your power steering pump, which is something that I don't have. So now that we've identified something that turns with half of the speed of the engine, we need to make some kind of indentation on this one so that we can get a signal out from here. So what I've done is I've drilled a little hole in here and I put a little, what is it, an M5 bolt in there. So that means that as this one is turning with half of the speed of the engine, for every revolution that this one does, the bolt will pass one lap here. And to detect when that actually occurs, you use one of these. This is a Hall type sensor from Bosch. Right? It feels like Bosch has made my entire car come true somehow. So it's a digital sensor. It sends out a signal every time it sees that bolt, which means now you will know when the engine is in the compression stroke. Right? And that will allow you to send the signal to the right spark plug. Right? This one, of course, needs to sit in something like this. Right? So this is a very simple mount. I'm going to make this out of aluminum. I'll make a bunch out of them, so if anyone wants to have one of these, go into my web shop and sponsor my project. So this one goes in there. And then this one will go in, I think, in this direction. So look at that. Now we have a neat little home sensor mounted in there. We chose to put it on the side where the power steering normally is. So this naturally doesn't work if you have power steering. If you do have power steering, you will have to mount it over there, which works just as well. The next thing I'm thinking about now is the heat in this compartment and what actually these ignition coils get subjected to. Because in the top here we have the ignition driver, which is electronics, right? It's an IGBT, and it doesn't terribly enjoy being in this saturated heat that you could have in an engine bay. So when we look at this engine bay and where we actually have heat, we tend to come up with two different scenarios. One scenario is the top of the engine, where the top row of the spark plugs are. This compartment, if you think about it, this compartment actually doesn't get hot, right? At least not when the engine is running. And the reason for that is you have this huge fan that makes sure you evacuate the air and circulate the air up in this compartment all the time. And you can see this in my last intake I had when this engine was in the car the last time. I had a temp sensor in the back of the engine here, and it doesn't get hot as soon as the engine is running. As soon as you turn the engine off, then the heat actually communicates out to the entire chamber. So that's the only time that this part of the engine actually gets hot. The other part of the engine, which is in the bottom, this is a completely different story, of course, because here you have the opposite. Here you have very hot air coming out through the cylinders, through the cooling of the cylinders. Here, on the other hand, you have the passing of the velocity of the car, so you have some other things that helps here. But the spark plugs and the ignition coils that goes in the bottom, they will live a tougher life than the ones in the top. Is this an issue? I don't know. I had a similar system on my engine previously. It was not an issue. If you read the forums online, they will talk about this being an issue. I have actually never met anyone that has had an issue themselves, but there seems to be some people talking about having issues, but nevertheless, I'm gonna put them here. I'm gonna put the exhaust on now, so we see actually how this will space itself out and if we need to do something else. And with the exhaust in there, we see this. Coil number 1, quite some distance, yeah. Number 2, it's about the same. Number 3, however, this one is very close there. So this one will not live a very happy life there unless I do something with this. So as always, a few different options on what to do with this. By the way, on the other side, it's much better because there everything is offset. So there's no issue whatsoever on the other side. It's really only here. So some different options. I could ceramic coat this one, which I will do if I get a recommendation on where in the world I can send it to get this done in a manner that doesn't kill my wallet, because that's otherwise what I would do with this. Then you could line it with this tape to have it as a heat insulation barrier. That's pretty good and pretty easy. I could put one of these shields in and fabricate up something that doesn't look too bad. That sort of sort of covers this area. I'm not terribly fond of that idea because it feels kind of stupid, but I'm sure it will work very well. Now, knowing that this might be an issue with the heat in this area here, I think it's very prudent to put the whole thing back into the car so that I can see if there's any other thing in the surroundings here that also would be affected by the heat, so that I don't just resolve this issue and then I put it back and then I see that I have another issue. So this guy is going back in there. Ska vi se, då kan du hojta till när underdelen på dämparen är där då, så vi kan skjuta in den. This is an interesting way of doing an engine drop or engine reversal. because there's no gearbox in there. But this will be enough to get an idea about how the exhaust interferes with everything else in the car, considering what kind of heat shielding we need to apply. And what I'm realizing here is that it was not as easy as I thought. It never is to just plug the engine back in, because the mounts for the muffler is actually interfering. Might be able to shift those around a little bit so that I can get around this, but I think easier is to just take the bumper off. Okay. Oh. This might be the closest to having the engine back in the car that I've been in a very long time. It's still on the stand, obviously, because I'm lazy, and this was easy. Now we can see how the exhaust comes down here, and we see the point that we were a little bit worried about. It's here. It's very close to the shock as well, so we cannot just isolate the coil. Looking at the other side, we see it's going to be a really good tire heater, the exhaust here. I know that has nothing to do with the ignition system that we're focusing on today, but again, it means that I can't just shield the plugs. I need to shield the whole thing. On this side, as you can see, there's a lot more space to everything, so it's really the other side that is the concern for the plug. Here, I think the concern is more the tire, and on the other side, it's also that it's close to the suspension. We see another thing here that I need to address as well, and it's these two pistol heads or muzzles or whatever we're going to call them. The exhaust coming out. This actually hits the bumper, so we're going to have to do a little cutout of the bumper there to make sure we manage that. And since I was already in there tinkering with the other things of the exhaust, I think I better get this thing resolved as well. So I took the bumper, I squeezed it on there. It's carbon Kevlar, so it's quite flexible. And I get a better idea now about how much actually I need to take out of the bumper to get this thing to fit. So philosophy and way I'm going to approach this is I'm going to get a cutout here. I'm going to print an insert in a material that can take a lot of temperature, and I'm going to find a way to really make that look nice but make it functional. Okay, so quick fix, getting the bumper corrected so that it actually fits with the car. So I see what I'm doing. Marked out the center between the two exhaust pipes. I've made a rough geometry of this in my computer based on the measurements I took. Now I need to have an exact geometry so that the cutout I make here is perfect, right? So I've made these, and I didn't make them all at once. So what this is just a 5-minute profile, so that the first one is just my very first guess on how the profile looks. See, it doesn't fit at all. Then I made another one. I don't know exactly which one, but I made another one. Fits a little bit better. Then it fits a little bit better. And in the end, I end up with an almost perfect fit. So now, by printing these profiles, that takes just 5 minutes each. I just make a rough sketch in my CAD tool. I print it flat. Then I can, in maybe 2 hours time, I've gotten the exact geometry here. And what I came up with was something that looks like this, right? So imagine having the two exhausts here. Then you just have a nice little ridge around that. I think, maybe it's difficult for you to imagine just by me holding this blue little thing here. But you know what? I'm going to make a cutout on this one, and we're going to see how it looks. And to make such a cutout, since I now have everything perfectly nice in my CAD model, I made a little template. So this template, it fits should fit. Yeah, it holds exactly the same shape towards the bumper as this one does, but this one, right? So silly little thing. But since I had the CAD perfectly done up there, I could make something that fits perfectly, so that I don't risk cutting the wrong piece of the bumper out. Phew, that was a bit gnarly when I used this thing. It's a little bit too strong for this, so it did ship out a little bit there. Doesn't matter because it's going to get covered, right? More specifically, it's going to get covered by something like this. Yeah, not too bad. You know what? It will do the job. It doesn't look very good, but yeah, maybe it's actually the color of this blue piece there. I did make one in what might be the final material, which is nylon, carbon fiber infused nylon that will take upwards around 130, 140 Celsius, something like that, before it starts deforming. Let's put that in place. Yeah, it looks better than the other one. It looks a little bit bulky, the whole thing. But nevertheless, this car is about driving fast. This will resolve that issue because now the bumper doesn't interfere with the exhaust anymore. Next piece. And just for shows, since this is the first time the engine makes a semi-appearance in the car, I did put the intake in so that I can get a better view on how it's going to look. That was a little sidebar, just fixing the bumper there. I wanted to do it while I was at it, and so that I could sort of finish that piece. Not terribly happy with the result though, but it'll work. Never mind. Back to the headers, back to the heat shielding of the headers, or more specifically, heat shielding of everything else outside of the headers. Based on what I saw back there, I'm going to do this heat shielding based on this tape, or it's not tape, it's a more like a band-aid, and it's made of some material, don't know what it is, and I will just wrap these headers with this one. I haven't done this before, but this can't possibly be very difficult. I've taken a short piece of this wrap off, and I'm just gonna try on a little piece. Yeah, I don't think it's more to it than this. I'm gonna have to figure out what I do with such a big roll, but yeah, let's just get at it. Once you start getting the hang of it, this is not very difficult, as most of these things. I used a little strap just to get it to anchor in the top here. Then I'm basically just slingshotting the thing around here, trying to feel that I get some overlap in between them. There's different widths of these. I took the 1 inch width, which might actually have been a mistake. There's a 2 inch width as well. But nevertheless, look how fancy and cool this is ending up. Okay, so I'm pretty much done over here. Let's get a proper strap on this. Let's see, we try to tighten this as much as we can. We end up with this beast. Right? I think it went pretty okay. I got it pretty symmetric, I think. What I did not master is these stainless steel straps. I don't know what I did wrong. I thought I did it right, but nevertheless, it's there. It's together. So here we go again for a very scientific test. The heat camera I had didn't work very well, but these work pretty well. And after like 5 minutes of running the heat gun there's nothing here. or nothing. I can feel that they're hot, of course, but this is something completely different. So obviously this makes a very big difference, and yeah, I think this will really keep my ignition alive, as well as all the other surrounding things, which makes me pretty happy. Looking at the header back in the car, I find myself with something really, really difficult to film. I hope you can see. The distance is the same as it was before, but the heat shielding should be a lot better. I think this is going to work, considering that it worked before when I didn't have this. So I'm starting to feel pretty good about this. We have today looked a little bit at the ignition system. Not a huge thing, of course, fixing up an ignition system, but I think a really nice simplification to these old engines. The engine is making a guest appearance for the very first time inside the car body after all of this work. It's a little bit fake, I understand that. I've taken the car body on top of the engine stand, and it's no gearbox and stuff in there, but it still gives me an idea and starts helping me to imagine the things I still need to do to get this completely done, which, by the way, is creeping dangerously close to the car being actually a functional car. Really cool. The heat shielding was a little bit of a struggle. I know there's maybe better ways to do that with ceramic coating and so on. In the end, that's maybe what this car will get. But this will definitely work for the time being, and I'm happy to have gone through that. Happy to hear also your comments about that. If you have some advice or input, let me know, and I will see you next time.